What makes one man or woman successful in mastering life, while another is beset with personal difficulties and moral confusion? This is the question posed by the author Lowell Russell Ditzen, author of Secrets of Self-Mastery. And I wouldn't be surprised that such same thought might be one that many of us have asked at one point or other in our lives. I, like many of you, and I prefer to think that there are not many of you who have had to go through the gauntlet of fire or the crushing struggle of life that weighs you down like a mountain on your shoulder. Like I said, it would be magical to think that perhaps you're one of the lucky ones. But what I've learned that appearances can be deceiving, and it seems that everyone gets their due share of struggle. So it's a matter of which perspective you wish to take, the V for victim or the V for victorious. The way I see it, we're here doing time. I'd rather trudge along with an attitude of victory, even if the victory be that I did the best I could with what I had this day, versus giving my power away and taking the stance of a victim. Yet that is a choice. Which would then beg to ask, what are the keys to self-discovery and personal mastery? Where's the manual? Many sages of the past, as well as Dr. Ditzen, who was a Presbyterian minister, have said that it is in the mastery of ourselves that we can hope to achieve in any measure the outward mastery of life. Hello, I'm Daisy, your hostess. You're joining me at part 3 of this 12-chapter book read video series where we have been gathering golden nuggets from the book titled Secrets of Self-Mastery, an Inspirational Guide to the Mastery of Life by Lowell Russell Ditzen. If you've been following along from the first chapter, let me know where you're from and leave a comment if you found anything useful. I hope you have. We're now in the home stretch, and I'm glad that the author reserved a chapter about the importance of tapping into and cultivating intuition, which we'll cover in this video. He proceeds to say that it unlocks inner wisdom and allows us to make inspired decisions and live in harmony with our highest potential. So we'll learn a little bit about how do we follow that intuition. We still have a few chapters to go through, so I won't delay any further. I thank you for joining me. I now turn the page. Chapter 9, Mastery from the Mystery of Intuition. A quote from the book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 26. It was revealed to him, Simeon, by the Holy Ghost, that he should not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. A quote from Cicero. This, therefore, is a law not found in books, but written on the fleshly tablets of the heart, which we have not learned from man, received or read, but which we have caught up from nature herself, sucked in and imbibed, the knowledge of which we were not taught, but for which we were made. We received it not by education, but by intuition. A quote by John Dewey. The aim and ideal that move us are generated through imagination, but they are not made out of imaginary stuff. They are made out of the hard stuff of the world, of physical and social experience. The new vision emerges through seeing all things in new relations, serving a new end, which the new end aids in creating. A quote by Dryden. A kind of enthusiasm or extraordinary emotion of the soul. A quote by Johann Caspar Lavater. Intuition is the clear conception of the whole at once. It seldom belongs to man to say without presumption, I came, I saw, I conquered. A quote by John Masefield. Imagination is controlling and using the energy of which we are made. Those who succeed in this have access through their partial energy to all energy. The thoughts of these men have the divinity of all energy. They do not die. An elderly woman was telling of her town's favorite son. He was the hometown boy who went off into the wide world and made good, said the aged lady who had known the man from birth on. When he was about 14 years old, most folks, if asked where he was going to end up, would have said the penitentiary. He was the most harum-scarum boy in the neighborhood. If the Sunday school was disrupted, he was the one who was behind it. He graduated from college by the skin of his teeth. Then she smiled. But I always knew he had mighty good stuff in him, and one day we'd all be proud of him. That woman had what we call an intuitive knowledge or assurance or faith. She looked upon that boy and came up with an evaluation altogether different from that which obvious facts and reasoned thought seemed to suggest. That's what intuition is. It's a source of knowledge that is based on an immediate comprehension of some truth. Intuitionalism opposes the idea that all of our knowledge or understanding or wisdom is based on observable facts, reasoned judgment, or intellectual processes. Its examples are as legion as they are varied in our daily life. If you play golf, more than once you have heard a player say, "I just knew I was going to flub that drive," or "I sensed the minute I started my backswing that the ball would end up in the pond." A friend to whom I made this observation replied, "Yes, it's sad but true. However, isn't the reverse also true? Can't the ball be visualized as sailing straight down the fairway and occasionally, very occasionally, perhaps, doesn't it work that way? Please say it does, because I'd like to improve my score." I assured him that it was true and presented no bill for the secret. For I have often heard a player say when a game is over, "I can't explain it fully, but I was sure as the sun is in the sky that I'd play well today. I felt right. I knew I'd win." But look at other illustrations. Haven't you ever had the sense of some impending unpleasantness? Haven't you heard in family discussions someone say, "I knew the minute I got up this morning it was going to be a tough day, and it certainly worked out that way"? Or, "I just felt in my bones that romance wouldn't last." Or someone says, "The moment I met that man, I knew immediately he fit into our organization." Or, "I had the strangest sensation that that man couldn't be trusted." And someone else says, "The moment I saw that girl, I knew she was the one for me." So we express intuitive judgments about experiences and relationships with our fellow men. This ability in man has a deeper, more significant aspect. It is not a mere tiddlywinks game of casual significance. Intuition has also played a powerful part in scientific, aesthetic, moral, and religious discoveries. One of the great spiritual insights was made by Plato, who affirmed, toward the end of his life, that the divine element was not coercive but persuasive. That thought came not from piling fact on top of fact, not from some process of logic. It was an inspiration of the mind, an illumination of the soul. It was what the philosopher Spinoza described as a form of knowledge that transcends that which is given by reason and is arrived at by the apprehension of the essence of things. Observation, evaluation, deduction had their place, but Plato grasped or was given that insight in a flash of intuition. If you want technical language for this endowment, you can put down the big word cosmesthesia. Cosmesthesia is the feeling we are all endowed with for the relationship of things. It is the intuitive understanding of what's good for us and a sense of what's bad for us. You and I have a perception of what will contribute to our well-being. Those who have sought to analyze and describe this perception affirm that there is a feeling of the consequences of a reaction. That awareness of the factors that will determine a particular conclusion is called, in case you are interested, telesthesia. You have these endowments, cosmesthesia, a sense of relationship, and telesthesia, a sense of consequences. But Robert Frost speaks the truth when he says that a full half of life cannot be reduced to a science. In art and letters, in religion and poetry, there are describable skills. But the touch that makes art immortal, the sparks of genius that illuminates the ages, cannot be described or defined or evaluated. So it is too with intuition. As a matter of fact, more knowledge of intuition comes from a sensitive appreciation of it than from any technical study. In dissecting it, the vital pulse beat is lost. I have long loved the lines of Walt Whitman. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagram to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. Pristine quiet and wonderment and enjoyment indeed opened the doors to a better understanding of the firmament. Old Simeon of the New Testament waited for years in the temple, his eyes growing increasingly dim as he looked for what his heart, not logic or reason, told him God was going to send into the world. After waiting so long, a carpenter from Nazareth with his wife and their firstborn son came to the temple. Simeon had seen similar families many times. To most, that father and mother and child looked like the others who came to the sacred place. There was a simplicity, a dignity, a devout faith about them. But had not hundreds of others been the same? Yet old Simeon moved with an unaccustomed quickness to their side and took the child lovingly in his arms. There was unwonted animation and clarity in his crackling voice. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. Simeon knew that the answer to the longing and hoping of his people was in the child held so tenderly in his arms. That kind of knowing, the intuitive sense that puts things in place and tells us what is important, the feeling for the essence of things, is one of the rarest and most precious gifts given to man. To be used fully, it must be developed thoughtfully, with care and sensitivity. As we learn to see relationships of problems, results of actions, the essence of life's meaning, we will gain in self-mastery. Keeping our eyes open is a simple but important part of intuition. We must not become dull or bored or tired. Simeon would not have had the experience that lighted his soul with its glow at the very end of his life if he had said one day, I'm too old, too tired, I no longer feel keen about going to the temple and continuing the long search. His undimmed eagerness, his watching and waiting, enabled him to perceive what the others observers could not see. The scripture says it was by the Spirit, and so it was. Sir William Rowan Hamilton, who made many significant discoveries and contributions in the field of mathematics, said that a basic problem for him came to a solution as he was walking with Lady Hamilton to Dublin and came up to Brougham Bridge. Does that seem inappropriate or impossible? Well, it is not. Such a flash of insight does not necessarily depend on where you are or what you're doing. It comes unheralded, out of nowhere. But of course, the way has been prepared. There is an inner awareness, a waiting, a receptiveness that is able to recognize the flash of truth when it comes. An old friend of mine has told me across the years of many amazing and rewarding experiences with individuals. His insights into the vast and complicated patterns within the family of man are fascinating and stimulating. Why is it so? He has cultivated a keen sensitiveness to his fellow men. In a hotel lobby or a train, he will speak to his neighbor, selecting a topic that he senses may be of interest. It may be education or world peace or transportation or the influences on the stock market. Whatever he has garnered in the way of insights about people has been due to the seeds he has sown. An ever-increasing awareness enables us to have a moment of intuition at the most unexpected times. Every experience becomes a laboratory that may reveal a secret. I don't think we Americans fully appreciate how broad and deep were the sensibilities of Lincoln to the problems not only of the nation, but of all people everywhere. We know that on a trip down the Mississippi, early in his career, he observed the practices of slavery. He looked, he felt, he evaluated, and insights and convictions were formed that later were to guide the nation. A man, before he died a frightful alcoholic death, told me of his failure to respond to the voice of intuition. Years earlier, when he was starting to drink heavily, he had a dream that clearly predicted the tragic end to which he finally came. He felt the challenge to give up alcohol, but too long ago had he abandoned life's challenges, and he was too weakened to heed the warning of his intuition. Youth is the time to make preparations, to develop alertness, awareness, but it is never too late to learn the technique of letting your insight guide you and spur you on to better things. The man or woman who is sensitive and keeps many avenues of life open will make the most of the flash of intuition when it comes. In turn, intuition comes most freely to those who have made themselves accessible. Little wonder that Wagner, always looking for new ideas for operas, caught the roar and excitement of a storm at sea and then wrote The Flying Dutchman. Mendelssohn also experienced a similar sensation while exploring a cave on the Scottish coast, listening to the sounds and reverberations of the lapping water. He heard and held the inspiration for his Hebrides Overture. Louis Daguerre, who opened the door to the whole field of photography, did so, someone might say, because of a chance insight. It wasn't altogether true. He was convinced that there was an answer to his problem. It is quite plain that the persistence that made him try one chemical after another, hoping to sensitize a glass plate and hold an image, had a great part in it. Madame Curie knew that uranium shed light rays, but she could find no reason for it. We could, for effect, emphasize just that one luminous moment when a new element was discovered. But we would gloss over the long, hard years of painstaking work with pitchblende. We would neglect the patience and perseverance it took to accumulate one vial of radium no larger than the eraser on a pencil. The epoch-making advances made by man have demanded insight and faith and persistence of the individual, just as self-mastery demands these things of you for successful living. A change of pace is always important to the conscious and the subconscious, which need the stimuli of varied experiences and motions and influences to quicken intuition. The railroad employee who sits on the bench at the station as well as in his office is seeing his work from a different viewpoint, at a different pace, which, if he is observant, will make him susceptible to fresh ideas that the old routine did not provide. I also recommend the practice of finding a time to just be quiet. It's a suggestion I make because it gives us a break in the day's fast pace, which many of us set for ourselves. Just sit quietly alone for an hour. Be perfectly still. Empty your mind of all thought. See nothing. Hear nothing. Let complete peace and calm reign. When you go back to your day's occupation, you will feel refreshed, receptive. Church-going is important in our lives because it provides that needed change of pace for our bodies, our minds, our spirits. As we enter that sanctuary, we are exposed to all kinds of stimuli. If we are ready, there are forces that can stir our imagination, touch our hearts, release our intuition. Some of my Most helpful sermons have come to me when my imagination was piqued or my mind was stimulated to wander off seeking some inner moment of truth. And while in recent years I have been more often in the pulpit than in the pew, I have never gone to a church service, however poor the place, and found the doors of perception closed to me. It has been beautifully said, "Prepare the vessel, and the Spirit will descend." Our vessel is prepared as we move about in different environments and make it receptive to new and fresh influences. We could probe this matter of intuition all our life and still have no scientific formula to describe it. We are nearer in its dynamic source when we consider the biblical references to the Holy Spirit, that active sense of God moving in and through us, making us patient, receptive, aware. John Calvin wrote a comprehensive theology known as the Institutes with a tremendous care. Those volumes still serve as a basic and definitive analysis of doctrine for millions of Protestants who are in the Presbyterian and Reformed tradition. Calvin was a lawyer, and as you read his manuscript, you are impressed by the logic, order, and reason in his thoughts and writings. Time after time, in a discussion of a particular aspect of belief, to the determinative element, he acknowledges the power of the Holy Spirit. That all-powerful force, which we have labeled intuition, when it enters a man's soul and gives him religious certainty, Calvin sees as God's active agent. Speaking of the Bible, he says you can respect its majesty, you can appreciate its literary content, but it never seriously affects us till it is confirmed by the Spirit in our hearts. When the persuasion comes, the mind rests with a security that is impervious to any doubt and is stronger than any reason. A man knows. The Spirit has been confirmed in the mind, and Calvin adds, it is sealed in the heart. Let me share with you these words from the Institute's Book 3, Chapter 2, Section 7. Now the human mind, blinded and darkened as it is very far from being able to penetrate and attain to a knowledge of the divine will. And the heart also, fluctuating in perpetual hesitation, is far from continuing unshaken in that persuasion. Therefore, our mind must be illuminated and our heart established by some exterior power, that the Word of God may obtain full credit with us. Now, we shall have a complete definition of faith if we say that it is a steady and certain knowledge of the divine benevolence toward us, which, being founded on the truth of the gratuitous promise in Christ, is both revealed to our minds and confirmed to our hearts by the Holy Spirit. The logician John Stuart Mill said that the truths known by intuition are the original premises from which all others are inferred. Is it not so? Ask yourself what is important and what it is that we are really talking about here and now. What are the basic premises of your life? What do you believe? I believe. Someone says, no, it's more than belief. I know that God is. How do you know? Prove it to me. I don't need to prove it. It has gripped the core of my deepest awareness. One day, I was surer than I am of anything that in Jesus Christ is the redemptive power to free me from sin and guilt. From an aimless wanderer, I was made a voyager of the waters of God's everlasting mercy and peace. Oh, come on now. Don't tell me that. How did it happen? Beyond a certain point, I cannot explain. I find that I don't need to explain it to you or myself or anybody else. This I know. It does happen. It did happen. I can say to you, as I say to myself, the Spirit blows where it listeth. In a moment my seeking, my struggling was at an end. I found one rock of sureness and steadiness on which to stand when all else was shifting sand. The rock of faith. There is little to be added to this vast and beautiful and mysterious fact of human experience. Guard and treasure your gift of intuition. For here, however faltering and flickering its glow, It is the final lamp onto your feet. With this light, one can explore the heights and the depths of life's ultimate meaning. Here is the light to point your way to peace of soul. End of chapter. Chapter 10, Overcoming the Dark Opponents Who Challenge the Way. From the book of Psalms 23, verse 4. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. A quote by Bulwer Lytton. Diet yourself well on the biography of good and great men. See how little a space one's sorrow really makes in life. See scarce a page, perhaps, given to some grief similar to your own, and how triumphantly the life sails on beyond it. A quote by Burke. He that wrestles with us strengthens our nerves and sharpens our skill. Our antagonist is our helper. A quote by Epictetus. In case of any difficulty, remember that God, like a gymnastic trainer, has pitted you against a rough antagonist. For what end? That you may be an Olympic conqueror, and this cannot be without toil. A quote by Metastasio. Less pure had been the gums which the odorous balsam gives, if it had not been cut by the knife of the Arabian shepherd. A quote by John Neal. Kites rise against and not with the wind. No man ever worked his passage anywhere in a dead calm. A quote by Rabindranath Tagore. Our greatest men reveal to us a life whose glory is not in the absence of suffering, but in the fact that its suffering have been made creative, transmuted into the stuff of life itself. I think you will agree that in religious literature, the 23rd Psalm holds a unique position in the appreciation of men. It has haunting beauty. It is rich with fine patina that only time can give. Revered by the centuries, it touches the deepest sensitivity and affinities of man's soul. In it is music, poetry, perfect prose, all fused by universal longing and experience. But its final test lies not in its age, its beauty, its coloration, but rather in the quality of its tone. It has relevance to man's need. Its precious worth is not just in the sound of its words, or in the number of times it's been read, or in the way it is hallowed by familiarity and repetition. It speaks truth. It has traversed the hard road of life across centuries and speaks out the totality of man's experience. Happy and comforting moments are present, but also the knowledge that man's high idealism and purpose lose strength and need replenishment. Life is not all sweetness and light. There are shadows, enemies, mortal danger. The psalm does not omit one aspect of life. Recently, a woman visited the community I live in. After some days, she said, I've never been in a town, to my recollection, where I have met so many widows. I don't know statistically how many there are relative to other areas. There are many, but this can be said with certainty, that each of those women could tell of some occasion when at one moment the path seemed to stretch out ahead relatively untroubled. Then behold, the whole picture was suddenly changed. The future became clouded and uncertain. A dark opponent blocked the way. In one way or another, sorrow, tragedy, disappointment, failure stand unexpectedly and forbiddingly before us. Our children fail the goal they set for themselves, or they fail below the standard we had streamed for them. Disease or age dulls our senses. The energy of youth is subdued by the burden of the years. War calls, or poverty drains, or weakness betrays, and suddenly a silent, strong force challenges our way. We can't talk about any mastery of life without considering such times of hardship. We must be prepared for difficulty. To be successful, we must make weapons and school ourselves in methods of defense. But how? What are the steps and secrets here? First of all, we can accept the fact that, in one form or another, as the 23rd Psalm suggests, some distressing deal is in the cards for us all. Forearmed with this knowledge, we must believe that we are capable of meeting and facing obstacles, and we must strengthen our inner fortifications. On this matter of preparation, look at two of the heroes of history. Here are two men who dealt masterfully with life, first of all because they had prepared themselves. One is known as David, a shepherd boy. He is seen in his early years guarding his sheep, learning to use his sling to protect his flock. More than that, he is absorbing the quiet and solemnity of nature. He is learning the wisdom of the natural world and the wisdom of man. He is growing in the fear of the Lord. Now turn to another scene in his life, one in dramatic contrast to the quiet picture of the boy tending his lambs. Now he stands before the giant Goliath, who has terrified the legions of King Saul. The little shepherd lad goes out alone to meet the enemy. Behold, there is an astonishing and unexpected victory. A miracle is wrought. The giant falls before David's sling. Then that shepherd boy, so insignificant in the back meadows with the flock, goes on to become Israel's most illustrious king. His courage and faith and steadiness and vision help to expand and stabilize a whole people. But do not forget his days of preparation when, as a shepherd, he was quietly growing in strength. Turn to a page from the history of our own country, when the very foundations of our corporate life were shaken during the Civil War. The man who led the nation through to peace was one who had long been schooled in the hardships of frontier life. From the rigors of log cabin and rail-splitting days, from disappointment in romance, from difficulties met in the daily struggle with poverty, from defeat at elections, from the discipline of himself and other men, he learned that life was tears as well as laughter. The competent individual in any field is known by his ability to meet emergencies. The experienced surgeon performs an exacting operation. All seems to be going well, but at a particularly crucial moment, the patient's pulse begins to fail and his life is in jeopardy. But the long, silent study of years, together with more years of building up experience, have made that doctor fitted for moments like this. Quick orders are given, decisive action follows firm decision. The patient's strength is restored, and he lives. Look into the courtroom. The question between the contenders is important. The masterful lawyer has carefully prepared his case. His brief is ready. The procedure is visualized in his mind. And the groundwork for the steps in his presentation has been laid with thoroughness. But the unexpected happens. The testimony of a witness suddenly puts a different slant on the facts. A bit of evidence is introduced that was not anticipated. The case, with its important consequences, can be lost. But that trial expert was made for issues like this. Out of his silent times of thought and preparation have come versatility and judgment to cope with any eventuality. He changes his emphasis in presentation. The seemingly important factors are met head-on and reduced to inconsequential size before the larger issues they at first seem to weaken. The case and the cause it represents is one because there was preparation to meet any difficulty that might challenge him. It is wise to admit to yourself that in one form or another the dark opponent will, at some time, block the way. And your preparation gains a step forward when you accept the fact that all of us were made to endure and survive trouble. This is amazingly verified by what we are psychologically. Our physical organs are built to meet unexpected trials. One lung can be lost. The heart may be impaired. The liver may not function fully. The major portion of the pancreas, we are told, can be removed and still sufficient alkaline secretion is produced to carry on the basic process of digestion. Yet, the physical organism can still live. It is equally true that, as we are physiologically able to continue, so are we able to do mentally and spiritually. There is much truth in the adage, no burden is put upon us that we do not have the strength to bear. We were made not merely to eventfully plod along the road of life, we were made to do battle with unexpected assailants of sorrow and opposition and find comfort and hope and renewed strength in overcoming them. G.K. Chesterton once said, "For one man who wants to be comforted, 100 want to be stirred." Men want, in the last resort, not life, but drums. He's right, isn't he? To know that struggle will come, to prepare for it, and to know that this is what we were made for. It is an indispensable basis for any victory in life. The importance of these matters cannot be overemphasized when we think of the development of our own character and our children's. We certainly are reaping an unhappy harvest in the generation that has had a weak and libertine education, with its minimal emphasis on discipline and the need to be strong and prepared. In 1941, Will Durant wrote with feeling and fire, "The result is an adolescent without responsibility, a maturity without character, and our children will not thank us for the liberty of their youth. To exact nothing of a child that its intellect cannot understand and approve is the depth of nonsense to which some of us dedicated ourselves in the days of our dreams. Parents must learn again to command, to assign duties, and to see it that they are performed. They must not be ashamed to require and must fit themselves to deserve filial respect." It is the extremely imposed and inwardly accepted discipline that has brought substantial progress in any people of history. We see it vividly, in our time, in the rapid progress and development of Soviet Russia. We must never avoid, either in personal or corporate life, coming to terms with the requirements and responsibilities that make us strong, unless we prefer to breed a generation of totally mollycoddled, confused, and aimless individuals. No matter where we look, we see the advantages of preparedness. Lord Nelson's astonishing successes came on the sea because of his insistence on being forearmed. What hardship and hard work he demanded of himself and his men. But the confidence and skill in battle were rooted in the discipline that he had imposed on himself and his men. It mattered not that his opponents were idle in their port. He and his navy were tirelessly training at sea. On the occasion when he learned that Villeneuve had returned to Toulon because of bad weather, he exclaimed, "These gentlemen are not accustomed to the Gulf of Lyons gales, but we have buffeted them for 21 months without carrying away a spar." Struggle and opposition are our lot in life, and the only way to meet them masterfully is to know that they will come and diligently prepare for them. But let us keep in mind that we were made only for conflict. It is in how we meet opposition that determines the real measure of our mastery. When we read a biography of a famous man, one of our first questions is, how did he start? Tell us about it. That is always an interesting part of a book, but more interesting still is how he ended up. We are willing to read about the fair breezes that blew him along his course, but tell us of the storms. That's the drama and excitement that bring us to the edge of our seats. That part moves us most because it tells us of the stuff of which he was made. We are touched as Jesus speaks the words of the Sermon on the Mount. We can see clearly in our mind's eyes the place where he purportedly spoke those immortal truths. To the north can be seen the snow-covered peak of Mount Hermon. Southward, the River Jordan begins its major flow to the Dead Sea. The slope where the Master stands inclines gently to touch the waters of Lake Galilee. Hundreds listen with loving attention. There is a lifting up of hearts. Jesus and his listeners are wrapped in glory and exhilaration that cannot be fully explained by any of them. We listen with those who are there. We breathe the air they do, and it has a new freshness and stimulation. We walk away with them, His Spirit giving a new dimension to our life. We, with all who are there, know that this man is, indeed, a master. But in the narrow, twisting streets of Jerusalem, where people spat upon him, where his shoulders sag under the burden of a cross, where blood trickles into his eyes to mingle with the salt of his tears of pain, we are moved to a feeling that Galilee could not evoke. Look at him. In silence, in spite of the mockery and cruelty, he keeps going. We fall on our knees in his most terrible but most majestic hour. He gave us immortality in this life, but we do not purchase it with our comfort, but with our pain. All who know the past history of Mormonism, together with the discipline and dedication that mark that religious order, have great respect for it. Something of the original vitality of Brigham Young still flows through it. Recall that man's early life. It was marked by suffering under extreme poverty and living by the standards of a strict moral code. Brigham spent only 12 days in school, and Vardy Fisher has written, during the remainder of his boyhood he chopped cordwood, plowed and planted and reaped, going barefoot most of the time and in rags, but keeping his will unbroken and his mind serene. His father often punished him, giving him a blow first and a warning afterward, because his son often walked on Sunday, not for exercise, but for pleasure. Out of that stern background came the strong resources to lead those children of God across the plains, facing devastating hardships and opposition to Utah. Because Brigham Young had met and mastered obstacles, because he had mastered himself, he created some of the finest dignity and glories of the Mormon faith. The man who has really mastered himself will look at difficulties and opposition not with fear, but with exhilaration and anticipation. The New Testament speaks of glorying in tribulation, because tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope, and hope maketh not ashamed. We have to live with ourselves, to live with a self that has been fearful of trouble, that has evaded hardships, that has weakly compromised instead of honestly struggling against evil, can produce no happiness or pleasure. Our conscience gives us a glow of inner dignity when we can say to ourselves that we have, when life demanded it, pulled with vigor and determination against the tide. The truth is that our physical and mental and spiritual nerves are most keyed up, are sharpest when we face difficulty. I have a friend who is a flyer. He has told me of hazardous flights during the war and of storms and sleet in more recent times. I've always been impressed how alive his eyes become, how animated his voice as he describes those moments. Once he was asked why he found such satisfaction in those experiences. His response was, "Why? I suppose that then I had the feeling most of all that I was alive." We have been made to survive just about any foe except success. When there is no feeling of opposition, when the imagination visualizes no contenders who will rise up to offer his fearsome challenge, then life softens up. Philip Brooks expressed it this way: "Bad will be the day for every man when he becomes absolutely contented with the life that he is living, with the thoughts that he is thinking, with the deeds that he is doing, when there is not forever beating at the doors of his soul some great desire to do something larger." It is the answer to a challenge keeps us from falling into the slough of idle content. With a purpose that is beyond ourselves, with the keying up of our energies and resources, we find that life has a vitality and meaning. To believe that we are born into this world for some good and constructive purpose, and to move forward, enables us to take what opposition or failure there may be without succumbing to it. We may fail or seem to be subdued, but only momentarily. The cause for which we are struggling is greater than ourselves, and the struggle itself, be it successful or unavailing, is inconsequential. You see this masterful strength in a man like Lincoln. Harsh criticism and stinging opposition surrounded and confronted him, yet he moved with dignity and strength and steadiness. The outward barbs did not wound him inwardly. His purpose in life was his shield. One may wonder how so many individuals facing vast tides of opposition can still move forward with such resolution and will. The only answer seems to be the fact that they are committed to a cause that transcends their own brief lives. Something of heroic quality is felt in the Apostle Paul. He was a prisoner. His end was near. His cell, bare and inhospitable, was in total contrast to the glory of the Roman Empire around him. A citizen of Rome, he could have made compromises and adjusted to the pleasures and outward trappings of Roman civilization, but something stronger claimed him. A purpose gripped and dominated him that would not let him go. By giving his life for what he believed in, now stands out more masterfully across the centuries than the rich and the idle and the briefly successful of gilded Rome. His words touch the depths of every sensitive and sincere soul. I have fought a good fight. I have kept the faith. I have stood under the awesome shadow of the Parthenon in Athens and looked at the great stone drums that Alexander the Great, before he began his victorious campaign, pointed out to his generals. There was a great purpose that kindled his imagination. So successfully did he transmit his vitality and intensity to his associates that the difficulties and obstacles and oppositions that lay before him were as nothing before the bravery and daring to meet and overcome it till the world was conquered. Alexander the Great was magnificent as he stood on the Acropolis at Athens. But at the end of his career, with purpose and meaning disintegrated, he died, a desolate death. He failed because he had lacked what sustained Paul to the bitter end, a cause beyond himself that would enable him to say finally, I have fought a good fight. I have kept the faith. We meet life masterfully when there is knowledge and a growing conviction that God is and that He is with us. This is the ultimate source of power to meet the dark opponents on the way. Let me share with you a few sentences from an unexpected letter that I received from a man in Lancashire, England. Having read my book, Personal Security Through Faith, he expressed sincere appreciation and then went on to say, perhaps most of us, like myself, are turned to the search for a really secure way of life because of some trouble. And it is perhaps after trouble that security seems so far away. When we have health and ability to work, we believe that we can earn our own security without any help, either from above or below. When we lose our health, we tend at first to think that we are at the end without hope. Perhaps serious illnesses which curtail our activities for more than a short period are sent to us merely that we shall start to search for the real truth of being. All I know is that I have been forced, almost perhaps against my will, to take the first steps in throwing my whole being on the mercy and strength of God. He is caring for me always. I know that now, though 2 or 3 years ago I would probably have laughed at the idea, indeed, He is caring for me so well that at the age when most men moan that they are beginning to be unemployable, I am giving up my business and starting a new career. To have the sense of God's Spirit and purpose in our lives does for any man what it has done for our friend from England. New frontiers are opened. Other people are inspired. Those who follow in the way that has been blazed are enabled to go further than would have been the case otherwise. There's evidence to show that our pilgrim fathers thought that the land inward from the coast was without any value. To them, it was impassable forest. Up to the time of George Washington, the Alleghenies were regarded as a barrier over which men would not and felt they could not pass as a matter of fact. Patrick Henry likened the Allegheny mountains to the Alps that separated European nations, and he said that mountain ranges are lines that God has set to separate one people from another. One of the most thrilling chapters in our history is the record of those who opened the way, who found the passes, who built the tunnels and bridges and roads, and the machines that enabled men to move over the seemingly impossible barriers. The stark and lonely places of the world, which seemed to be impossible to penetrate, have been conquered through man's efforts. As our lives have been enriched by the inspiration of others who have gone before, so we are compelled by God's Spirit to do the same for those who follow. In doing so, we are strengthened by the realization that in meeting our hardships with patience and courage and confidence, we achieve some of our deepest insights and the richest fulfillment. We can look back over the hard and bitter days and years of struggle and count them among our best. The other day, I received a letter from a woman in the Midwest who wrote of her hard and sorrowful times. Then she added, "What understanding and sensitiveness I have acquired through the years came most of all from those milestones that mark my darkest times." There's wisdom in her words. Those who go through their dark hours with hope and calmness will find that they are milestones marking their surest moments of progress. There are 3 ways that prepare us for life's trials. One is the Spartan way that says, "I have strength within me to do it. I am the captain of my soul. With the courage and will that is mine, I will master be when the struggle comes." Another way is in the spirit of Socrates, who affirmed that we have minds, reason, and judgment to evaluate and help us cope with the enigmas and struggles of life. The Christian way is the third approach. It doesn't exclude the first 2, but it adds, you don't begin with yourself, your will, or your reason. You begin with God, who is the beginning and the end. When your strength grows weak and your reason fails you, faith in the Creator gives you the power to overcome all things. We need the presence of God's Spirit in the midst of our struggles. That inner quiet gives us a relief from uncertainty, from tension, from fear. Gone is our concern about what others may think. We stand true to ourselves and what is of ultimate value. Jesus of Nazareth, standing before the tribunal, about to be crucified, was a victim of man's ignorance and brutality. Yet he was quiet. There was an absence of bitterness or complaint. His inner mastery that had developed through the years reached its superb climax in the agony of the Garden of Gethsemane. Through the tortured hours, he came to the invincible conviction, "Not my will, but thine be done." We need to be honest with ourselves and admit that, in the last analysis, our ultimate source of power comes not from within ourselves, but from God. Alexander Miller, in The Renewal of Man, put it this way: the human dilemma calls not for a resolve, but for a rescue. The man who stands with mastery before life's dilemmas is the man of intellectual strength and conviction, securely girded with will and reason. But as the years go by, he will fail, his wounds and scars will increase, the battle is unending. His will grows weak, his energy wanes, his doubts grow more pressing when his sense of purpose and direction has grown dim, and he is ever more aware of his weaknesses and his defeats. He can no longer respond as he once did. The only answer for him is in the awareness that underneath are the everlasting arms. He sees that he has had a small part in building the universe. He has removed forward a little bit and made the way somewhat easier for others who follow. And his self-mastery, his final peace, rests on the belief in God, who sees the overall purpose in creation. End of chapter. Chapter 11. The Ennobling Power of Patience. A quote from the book of James, chapter 1, verse 4 and 19. Let patience have her perfect work. Be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. A quote by Augustine. By their patience and perseverance, God's children are truly known from hypocrites and dissemblers. A quote by Count de Buffon. Never think that God's delays are God's denials. Hold on, hold fast, hold out. Patience is genius. A quote by Emerson. Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. A quote by Leigh Hunt. Patience and gentleness are power. A quote by Longfellow. Patience. Accomplish thy labor. Accomplish thy work of affection. Sorrow and silence are strong, and patient endurance is godlike. Therefore, accomplish thy labor of love, till the heart is made godlike, purified, strengthened, perfected, and rendered more worthy of heaven. A quote by Milton. They also serve who only stand and wait. A quote by Francois Rabelais. He that has patience may compass anything. A quote by Ruskin. Endurance is nobler than strength, and patience than beauty. A quote by Shakespeare. He that will have a cake of the wheat must needs tarry the grinding. Our grandparents did more repeating of old axioms, more reading of wise sayings than do we moderns. Copybooks of students from the 19th century contain adages and poems written by youngsters who thereby gained spiritual inspiration, as well as improved skill in penmanship. In Our Home is a Book, profusely illustrated and beautifully set in clear type, that was published in the 90s. It bears the title, The Ideal Life, The Royal Road to Success and Happiness. On the cover, bordered with lilies, is a picture of a Victorian family seated before a fireplace. Its 600 pages are devoted to the qualities that make for the good life. Among its finest sections is a full treatment of one of the cardinal virtues that is indispensable to life's mastery. A few light verses by Mary F. Van Dyke identify it. They read, There is a little plant that grows in almost every soil, if he who sows the seeds bestows a little care and toil. Though needful as the constant food that daily want supplies, like every other common good, we fail the plant to prize. Till absence of its proves his worth, and discord holds its sway, and crosses incident to earth grow heavier every day. We call it patience, kind to three, that would redeem the fall, bless faith, and hope, and charity. We surely need them all. I've been told by a native of the eastern part of America that in many a kitchen of the sturdy New England household there grew a patience plant, cultivated where busy hands toiled all day. When evening came and spirits may have been at low ebb, the plant spoke its simple and elemental lesson. Patience. That little plant may very well have played its part in developing the fine-grained New England character. A boy who was informed that oaks grow out of acorns planted an acorn in the earth, and the next day, eager to see what was happening, he dug it up again. He repeated the process for a whole week, but still no oak appeared. "It isn't true," he cried. "It doesn't happen. No oak tree come from the acorn." "My son," said an older and wiser man, "it will happen, but it takes time. Rain and sun and warmth and quietness and many days and weeks must pass before the acorn unlocks its secret heart to begin the oak. You have to be patient to see it, and 'twill take all the years of your life till it stands a great tree against the sky." In your travels, you may have stood before the bronze doors of the impressive Romanesque baptistry in Florence. There you will have admired the work of Ghiberti, each panel of those majestic doors in a masterpiece. You may be moved to say, what vision, what genius created these? True, but only in part, my friend. It took 20 years of patient labor till the vision was translated into that ageless bronze. Patience is not acquiescence. It is not a quiet subservience and indifference. It is active orientation and growth of mind and strengthening of emotions. It requires that we know where we're going and that we know the difficulties on the way. Patience, which negates wasting time in quick and irrational spurts of energy or wandering aimlessly along byways instead of pursuing the intended goal, is indispensable to fulfillment. All of us have seen the disaster that results from lack of patience. People are hurt because someone could not restrain a sharp sword, a hurried judgment. A business can fail because someone, impatient for results, insists on overexpansion. We live in times when Howard Thurman's lines from "Deep is the hunger" speak for many. Always I have an underlying anxiety about things. Sometimes I am in a hurry to achieve my ends and am completely without patience. It is hard for me to realize that some growth is slow, that all processes are not swift. I cannot always discriminate between what takes time to develop and what can be rushed. Oh, to understand the meaning of perspective. But it is not too late to acquire patience and benefit from its application in our daily lives. A quiet, restrained approach to any situation, to any task, to any problem is the essence of patience. Pavlov, one of Russia's greatest scientists, just before his death at the age of 87, wrote a bequest to the academic youth of his nation. Although his prime interest lay in science, his counsel is by no means restricted to that field. He wrote, "What can I wish to the youth of my country who devote themselves to science? Firstly, gradualness. About this most important condition of fruitful scientific work, I never can speak without emotion. From the very beginning of your work, school yourselves to severe gradualness in the accumulation of knowledge. Learn the ABC of science before you try to ascend to its summit. Never begin the subsequent without mastering the preceding. Never attempt to screen an insufficiency of knowledge even by the most audacious surmise and hypothesis. Howsoever this soap bubble will rejoice your eyes by its play, it inevitably will burst, and you will have nothing except shame. School yourselves to demureness and patience. Learn to inure yourselves to drudgery in science. Learn, compare, collect the facts. Perfect is the wing of a bird. It never could raise the bird up without resting on air. Facts are the air of a scientist. Without them, you never can fly. Without them, your theories are vain efforts. But learning, experimenting, observing, try not to stay on the surface of the facts. Do not become the archivist of facts. Try to penetrate to the secret of their occurrence. Persistently search for the laws which govern them." Clearly, there is wisdom in those words that each of us can seek to use. Regardless of our profession or way of life, we are able to endure many irritations that are not worth bothering about, if we would but try. The patience of Jesus should be supreme example that we keep before us as we go through each day, saying to ourselves, "I will keep feeding my mind and heart with such a spirit." Some time ago, on a rainy day, as I drove through a long stretch of quiet countryside, I turned on the car radio. Fibber McGee was outlining to Molly an exciting and ambitious plan to produce a spectacular motion picture that would out-DeMille the meal. It was to be staged in the garage, which should be the studio. There were to be 10 people in the cast. The backyard was to be the set. There were to be conflicts between vast ancient armies. In answer to Molly's insistent and sensible question, Fibber said that by trick photography, repeating and splicing the film many times, the illusion of vastness and numbers would be created. Molly finally pointed out that even if all this was possible, he would still run into trouble because each member would want to be the star. Fibber pondered that a moment, obviously deflated, and replied, "Molly, that's the trouble with the world today. Nobody's willing to be a spear carrier anymore." It may be exhilarating to play a starring role in life, but there is steady satisfaction in doing the quiet, unheralded work patiently, lovingly. We should make use of the power of humility, the spirit that is quick to hear and feel, but slow to speak, slow to anger. A situation can easily disintegrate into chaos if we try to force things. Impatience brings in its wake many negative and destructive after effects. Dr. Leland D. Hinsey, in a discussion of the methods of training children, points out that parents should be in no great hurry. Successful management of children comes by calm reasoning, by repetition, and by a schooling that extends over a period of several years. He says, what parents do not commonly understand is that forming a character is a slow process, and that character can be remarkably distorted by neglect or over-solicitude or by forcing. He then added, we overlook the fact that it takes time to make a mother and a father. If we consider some of our own personal experiences, we will have to admit that in many situations we have reacted badly to pressure from someone else. Therefore, we should try to keep that fact in mind when we find ourselves impatiently pressuring others. How often I have counseled individuals whose marriages have been badly shaken. I shall never forget the poignant regret of one man who said, I wish to God that I had been able to control my impatience. It wasn't that I didn't have a good wife, I did, but my self-centered picture of what I thought she ought to be made me force issues that hurt her so deeply and so continuously that the damage is now beyond repair. He learned too late one of the fundamental rules for self-mastery. One of the greatest biblical passages is from the Gospel of Luke. In your patience ye shall win your souls. It is good for a man to know that he may win his own security, his own integrity, the flowering of his own selfhood, not by strife, but by patience. The surest foundation for patience is having the perspective of eternity. We must be certain of the end before we can travel the distance, through light and dark, through good times and bad, with confidence and serenity. When we grow weary, we are apt to forget that there is an overall meaning of life, a meaning we can never fully grasp. At these times do we most need patience and an abiding faith in God. 1,000 years in his sight, says the psalmist, are but as yesterday when it is past. The church was not built in our time, nor in a few hundred years of history. It goes back to the dawn of conscience, to that moment when man, standing upright, knew that he had a mind and a soul. It enshrines the heroism, inspiration, insight that lighted the centuries, and it must be preserved for future generations who will seek to live by that light. Something of the perspective of God is here, quietly, insistently calling men in every era to strive for the truth till there exists on earth a true brotherhood of man. How patiently God must watch us and work through us. There is a patience that has created miracles of order about us, that has wrought wonders of harmony in the cosmos and awesome structures of faith and hope in the seeking mind and soul of man. Wherever we look, we are reminded that we are part of a creation where patience is indispensable to any perfect work. In our quest for knowledge of ourselves, of the world, in our efforts to bring justice and righteousness and truth to all men, we must also seek patience. We will find that in the Spirit of God that is in our soul. End of chapter. Chapter 12. Mastery as a citizen in the sovereign kingdom of God. A quote from the book of Revelation, chapter 11, verse 15. And there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdom of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord, and he shall reign forever and ever. A quote by Goethe. As a man is, so is his God. Therefore God was so often an object of mockery. A quote by John Jay. God governs the world, and we have only to do our duty wisely and leave the issue to him. A quote by Joubert. The God of metaphysics is but an idea, but the God of religion, the maker of heaven and earth, the sovereign judge of actions and thoughts, is a power. A quote from the Quran. To God belongeth the east and the west. Therefore, whithersoever you turn yourselves to pray, there is the word of God. For God is omnipresent and omniscient. A quote by Kossuth: history is the revelation of providence. A quote by Lowell: if thou hast wandering in the wilderness and finds no Sinai, 'tis thy soul is poor. A quote by George MacDonald: a voice is in the wind I do not know, a meaning on the face of the high hills, whose utterance I cannot comprehend. A something is behind them, that is God. A quote by Alexander Maclaren: all laws suppose a lawgiver, and all workings involves a divine energy. Shortly before his death in 1911, Sam Walter Foss composed these lines under the title, Two Gods. A boy was born mid little things, between a little world and sky, and dreamed not of the cosmic rings round which the circling planets fly. He lived in little works and thoughts, where little ventures grow and plod, and plowed his little plots, and prayed unto his little God. But as the mighty system grew, his faith grew faint with many scars. The cosmos widened in his view, but God was lost among his stars. Another boy in lowly days, as he, to little things was born, but gathered lore in woodland's ways, and from the glory of the morn. As wider skies broke on his view, God greatened in his growing mind. Each year he dreamed his God anew, and left his older God behind. He saw the boundless scheme dilate in star and blossom, sky and clod, and as the universe grew great, he dreamed for it a greater God. Those lines contain a twofold idea that no honest seeker of truth should sidestep, that no counselor who tries to help us in our search should evade. The first idea is that man, to a certain extent, creates his God. The other idea is that the concept of God that a man has helps to mold him. The image that man creates in turn creates him. I dare say that if you put down on paper your concept of God, you would use some imagery of the Bible to portray him in terms of personality. Many of us have a picture, vague perhaps, but nonetheless sure, of a benign, fatherly figure. Chris Blake writes, after all, faith is not belief in spite of evidence, but life in scorn of consequence, a courageous thrust in the great purpose of all things, and pressing forward to finish the work which is in sight, whatever the price may be. Then, expressing his opinion on the concept of God in terms of personality, he writes, who knows whether the personality of which men talk so much and know so little may not prove to be the temporary limitation rather than the necessary expression of life? Indeed, across the centuries, scores and scores of men and women, from the lowliest to the highest intellectual circles, have visualized their God in terms of personality. And some have described God as pure spirit, a force, a power at work in the universe, similar to the classic definition in the Westminster Catechism. God is a spirit, infinite, eternal, and unchangeable. Such a description is found in Lalami's prayer, taken from the Indian book, edited by Natalie Curtis. The passage reads, to whom do the Hopis pray? It is that which makes the rain, that makes all things. It is power, and it lives behind the sun. Does the power that lived behind the sun look like a man? Or like anything the Hopis have ever seen? No, it is not like a man. We do not know how it looks. We only know that it is. When Lolo Lomai, the chief, prays, how does he pray? He goes to the edge of the cliff and turns his face to the rising sun and scatters the sacred cornmeal. Then he prays for all the people. He asks that we may have rain and corn, and that our fields may bring us plenty. He prays that all the people may have health and long life and be happy and good in their hearts. And Hopis are not the only people he prays for. He prays for everybody in the whole world, everybody, and not people alone. Lolo Lomai prays for all the animals, and not for animals alone. He prays for the plants. He prays for everything that has life. That is how Lolo Lomai prays. But there are others who say, I must be honest, I still go to church, I bow my head in prayer and try to worship, but I have a deep personal perplexity. I ponder the chaos and evil and the irrationalism in this world, and I can't help but express the taunting whisper in my mind. I wonder why I am here at all. Sincerely, I question whether there is a God at all. How can there be a good God who would permit such misery and sorrow in life? No matter what our concept of God is or is not, to a large degree, we make it ourselves. Our idea of God is a result of our experiences, our thinking. It is constructed on the judgments, the observations, the evaluations, the conditioning from within, and from external influences by our fellow men. Here's a woman who says her life is shattered, her faith gone. Having lost a loved one, she now lies whimpering and helpless. You may say to her, My dear, what kind of faith did you have that is now abandoned you? Tell me about your idea of God. What kind of God did you believe in? And she describes a cosmic Santa Claus whose prime intent seemed to be to look after her welfare, her comfort. Suddenly, the image was smashed. The God she dreamed was inadequate. Over there is a very religious man. There is but one religion, and he has it. He tells you that he has been washed in the blood, that he is saved. But listen to him speak further. He is bitter toward those whose religion is different from his. He is constantly plaguing his associates. He damns as pagans other Christians whose practices differ from his. Why this strange paradox? My friend, what do you think about God? He outlines for you his concept of a jealous and inflexible monarch, easily angered, whose subjects must obey, or they are cast into the eternal fire of hell. We reflect in our lives the kind of God we believe in. If the concept of God is limited, that limitation is within us, wrote Edna St. Vincent Millay. He whose soul is flat, the sky will close in on him by and by. On the other hand, the greater your image of God, the more you will recognize and appreciate the wonder and the majesty of all creation. His compassion and forgiveness reaches into the darkest depths. His love extends to the farthest boundaries of space. The book of Revelation describes the divine thus, And there were great voices in heaven saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord, and he shall reign forever and ever. It is because we create false gods and because our ideas of the Lord God Almighty are so inadequate that we have great need of the church. It is there to teach us, to remind and guide us, to lift up to us the vision of God's sovereignty and majesty. It presents us with a truer, grander concept of the Lord, preserving the vital religious tradition of mankind. With that exalted and ennobling concept in our souls, we are enabled to deal more nobly and masterfully with life. It is clear that our concept of God should be ever-growing. It requires meditation and prayer, evaluation and interpretation. For some, this is accomplished with ease. Chesterton said of St. Francis, he ran away to God as other boys have run away to sea. However, St. Francis was an exception. For most of us, the development of a stable concept of God is a hard and painstaking business. The more common experience of man is described best by a quotation from the Towers of Trebizond. We may not be taken up and transported to our journey's end, but must travel thither on foot, traversing the whole distance of the narrow way. In this task, the individual and corporate experience of the church is tremendously helpful. It keeps before us the wider ideal. It teaches us the language of symbols which we need to understand in order to best appreciate the concept of God. Hawking, in his study The Meaning of God, speaks of the idea of God as containing an uncounted infinity which rests upon personal experience, insight, and revelation. Through sermon and prayer, by music and poetry, the church places that infinity before the seeking heart and mind. Each participant in the church contributes to and takes something from it. I'm sure you remember William Herbert Carruth's verses, each in his own tongue. Simply and tellingly, he shows the different interpretations and concepts open to man's mind. A fire mist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a jellyfish and saurian, and caves where the cavemen dwell. Then a sense of law and beauty and a face turned from the clod. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. A haze on the far horizon, the infinite tender sky, the ripe rich tint of the cornfields, and the wild geese sailing high. And all over upland and lowland the charm of the goldenrod. Some of us call it autumn, and others call it God. A picket frozen on duty, a mother starved for her brood, Socrates drinking the hemlock, and Jesus on the rood, and millions who humble and nameless the straight, hard pathway plod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God. It is difficult for some of us to think of church as an entity when there are so many varied denominations, but basically, every church is the house of God. The motto of the chapel of Watch Hill, Rhode Island, proclaims on its walls, "The church is many as the waves, but one as the sea. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity." The church exists with its treasury of spiritual experience, with centuries of thinking and feeling about and behind and through it, so that it can say to us, in the deepest perceiving and knowing, it is all God. This evolving universe, the loveliness of nature, the nobility of man, all bespeak his creativeness and purpose. Sing then his glory, bow in wonder and love and praise, then rise to walk the ways of man, but with the majesty of eternity about you. Are we deluding ourselves? Is the agnostic who says, "I don't know," really more intelligent and realistic than those who affirm as fact a supposition that can't be proven? Is it all just imaginative and lovely poetry, or an opiate and no more? The answer is no. There are two things to be said. One, if there is any weight of evidence, it points to God rather than the absence of God. Secondly, accepting the idea of God, experiencing the presence of God, acting as if God did not exist. Dr. Fosdick pointed out that it took only one footprint on Robinson Crusoe's island to lead to the undeniable conclusion that another man being was about. You could not explain that footprint as the accidental impact of the waves upon the sand. Someone had been there. As for the evidence of God, view this vast universe, consider the sweep of history, grant all of its evil and chaos. The amazing thing is that, amid the debris, there are some footprints on the sands of time. If there is but one footprint of purpose, you know that there is a Creator who indicates a bold and a majestic purpose that can't be explained by anything else we know. Look at the cross of Calvary. If ever there was evidence of human depravity, blindness, cowardice, ignorance, cruelty, it was there. And yet, that is not how history interprets it. Behold, in the courage, the compassion, the nobility in Jesus, there is an imprint that transcends evil and chaos. You and I know about chromosomes and their chance arrangement. We are told, and accept as true, that they determine the seeming ability, character, temperament of man. That I will accept as a reasonably well-documented hypothesis. But to ask me to believe that the mind of an Einstein, or the humanitarianism of a Schweitzer, or the wisdom of a Lincoln, or the compassion and love of Jesus is just a fortuitous arrangement of chromosomes is to ask me to stretch my credulity too far. I cannot accept it. This is not blind accident. This reveals the Spirit of God at work through man. There are the footprints of order and law and compensation and beauty and selflessness in man's history. It is a blind man who will say they mean nothing. It is not all just matter and motion. There is some noble purpose here. A master has created man and his destiny. Shakespeare says, "There's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will." James Russell Lowell exclaims, "Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet the scaffold sways the future." The evidence of a divine imprint in this cosmos is in the soul of man. To affirm this is not to accept an opiate. It does not restrain and restrict life, rather it frees it. The unbeliever loses that broadening experience altogether. He denies himself the joy and fulfillment of a great friendship with God, which is enriched by trust. But more than that, he is forced into the limitations of not trusting. Unable to believe in anyone or anything, he will find no reason to do much of anything. He can make no choice because he doesn't know what to choose or why. As a result, he denies himself the sense of responsibility that comes from commitment. The adventurous joy of believing is an experience that he does not know. His skepticism and indecision can be a decisive factor in creating an opiate to his spirit. There's a poignant tragedy for the mind and the soul of such a person. This is illustrated in the confession of Catherine Mansfield. She wrote to one correspondent after expressing first her rejection of the idea of a personal God and then her longing for such a belief. "It seems to me there is a great change come over the world since people like us believed in God. God is now gone for all of us. Yet we must believe. And not only that, we must carry our weakness and our sin and our devilishness to somebody. I don't mean in a bad, abasing way, but we must feel that we are known, that our hearts are known as God knew us. Therefore, love today between lovers has to be not only human but divine. Their love is their religion, but oh, it is no good. Without God, a man is a mere bit of flotsam, floating like other scum on an aimless, cold, and indifferent sea. To the man who believes, life has meaning, and in the struggle to go forward there is glory. There can be no sense of shatteredness, the sense of fragmentariness in your life if there is God. Rather, there is relatedness, meaning, wholeness. As D. Elton Trueblood put it, the only sure way in which we can transcend our human relativities is by obedience to the absolute and eternal God. I know at my deepest depths that God is because I have seen that flash of the eternal in the temporal. God did not stoop to earth just once to reveal himself in Bethlehem. I have seen him in the lives that are strengthened, lived more usefully, more compassionately. Lives that have radiance because they have looked on him for but an instant and seen all of good they need to know. His love and grace has drawn and won their love and allegiance. One of the finest descriptions of a Christian I've come across was composed by Charles Clayton Morrison. A Christian could be accurately defined as one who seeks to identify his conduct with the will of God, as this will reveal itself ever anew in living companionship with Jesus Christ. Love and faith are the conductors through which God is communicated to the soul. The Christian sees in Jesus not accident, but revelation, and the glow from eternity he sees in his Lord enters his own heart. Here is a quick summary of two biographies that tells the tale. Two boys are born and brought up in similar sections in Europe. They both look out upon similar mountains. One, an itinerant house painter, said later in life, "I hated my father and I managed my mother." He outgrew his dependent years. He became self-assertive, and he never outgrew that. He let it become a hard shell, shutting out any sounds of humanity and love. Out of that twisted life came a blight on the world, for that man's name was called Adolf Hitler. The other boy developed in the spirit of kindness and faith. He came to think of life with reverence, and some of the deep calling unto deep that went on all the time in his life led him to believe, as he put it, to live is to owe. His was a growing vision of service, and in that vision was the ever-growing figure of the Christ. This man, whose name is Albert Schweitzer, wrote, "He comes to us as one unknown, as he came to the disciples by the lake shore. He speaks the old words, 'Follow me,' and sets us to the task that He would have fulfilled in our time. He commands, and to those who obey in the conflict and the toil and the sufferings of a living fellowship, He reveals Himself as an ineffable mystery, and in the struggle of life they shall discover for themselves who He is. Such a man hears the song of eternity. The kingdom of this world are become the kingdom of our Lord. This man responds in affirmation. And He shall reign forever and ever. His heart and mind have been opened wide to the energy and purpose of the Lord. Though he is a subject in the kingdom, he faces every peril in life with courage and calm, for he is a nobleman in the service of the King. In closing this book, will you join with me in a simple prayer, which has often been mine in the writings? May the words of our mouths, the meditation of our hearts, the intentions of our minds, and the aspirations of our souls be acceptable unto Thee. Almighty God, give us an ever-growing concept of our task and our destiny. As our spirit rises on the wings of reason and faith, widen our awareness till we see Thy far horizons and majestic vistas. We acknowledge that we will not master be until we master find. We bow to touch the hem of Thy sovereignty. Accept our service in that everlasting kingdom whose banners are righteousness, justice, peace, and joy, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. End of chapter. And also, this concludes the reading of The Secrets of Self-Mastery, an inspirational guide to the mastery of life by Dr. Lowell Russell Ditzen. If this resonates with you, or you know of someone that could benefit from this reading, please do share. Hit the like button. Let me know you are here. Be blessed.